And it's an honor to appear before you today. And before I begin, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for your public service. I'm here to share the story of CVG and offer you the perspective of a medium hub airport. One of the most important things I hope you take away from today is that airports are running out of time for Congress to remove the outdated cap on the PFC. Our airports are aging. Our terminals are woefully inadequate relative to keeping pace with the growth in passenger demand and processing. Airports have investments to make now. We have jobs to support and create today. The ongoing, long-suffering arm wrestling between airports and airlines that you hear about is about one issue alone, and that's control. Airports want to work with, not for, airlines to the benefit of our communities. Let me share with you the example of CVG, which today operates very differently than it once did. Like my colleagues in Pittsburgh and St. Louis, CVG was historically dominated by a single carrier who operated a major connecting hub. The airport's long-term 40-year use agreement imposed significant restrictions on what the airport could do, how decisions were made, and what funds could be spent on capital projects. Average airfares from CVG were among the highest in the country. We had little funding in reserve for operating or capital costs. When the dominant airline reorganized under bankruptcy and merged with another in the late 2000s, CVG experienced what many of my new medium hub colleagues have faced, a dehubbing and downsizing of operations that required us to reinvent the essence of the airport. In the time since, we have right-sized the facilities, consolidating 3 terminals and 3 concourses into a single main terminal with 2 concourses. We demolished our oldest facilities to free up valuable space to lower our operating costs. We started developing airport property that would never be used for aviation purposes for non-aeronautical projects to diversify our revenue streams and create more jobs for our region. My team and I doubled down on operating the airport as the business it is. We focused on diversifying our business, keeping costs low for all of our tenants and airline partners, while maintaining prudent reserves. It's said that airports do not need increased local revenues and should simply work collaboratively with airlines to accomplish major capital projects. CVG is one of the best examples of what can happen when an airport or any business is overly reliant on one or a handful of business partners to achieve success. For as much success as we have had with our hub carrier, artificial limitations were placed on us for spending money or in creating competition on routes. Our success today is reflective of what happens when you empower good business management, operate more effectively at a local level, and create a level playing field for all business partners to flourish. Later this year, we will submit to the FAA our 2050 master plan, a 30-year outlook on the airport's infrastructure plan for growing and meeting capacity forecasts. The first order of items to support the master plan will be to maximize the use of the existing passenger facilities. We plan to repair, replace, and upgrade basic mechanical systems, jet loading bridges, conveyances, and baggage systems. In addition to required airfield projects such as taxiway and runway rehabilitations, these passenger facility improvements are in urgent need of attention, not from a cosmetic standpoint, but rather to meet operational readiness and reliability objectives. Our former hub carrier is responsible for ongoing maintenance of certain assets at the airport until the end of 2020. As of January 2021, CVG will have to assume the operating costs and responsibility for our outdated 25-year-old baggage facilities and passenger train, which were designed for connecting travelers. While 90% of our passengers were connecting during our hub days, local passengers now account for over 90% of our activity, a record level and a 97% increase since 2012. CVG's current 5-year capital program shows a need for $468 million in projects by 2024, nearly 30% of which is PFC eligible, about $137 million. The initial phase of our master plan is calling for approximately $500 million in additional terminal renovation and expansion costs between 2025 and 2030. Currently, CVG has imposed a $4.50 PFC, which is the maximum level allowed. For my airport, the PFC revenues we currently we currently and will continue to collect are almost entirely allocated to, one, reimbursing capital projects such as a runway that was constructed in the early 2000s at the request of our dominant carrier, and two, paying down a PFC-backed bond that financed a new entrance road to accommodate increased local passenger volume. Should the PFC cap be lifted to $8.50 and be indexed to inflation going forward, our ability to fund capital projects on a pay-go basis changes significantly. We estimate the ability to fund an additional $340 million in new PFC project costs while still meeting debt service coverage requirements. The next phase of our terminal improvement may be needed as early as 2027. With an increased PFC, we may be able to save about 2.5 years in completing such projects. We estimate saving $83 million in interest costs alone if additional PFC revenue is available, and will thereby avoid having to pass costs onto our airline partners and their operating rate base.
If you could quickly summarize.
I'll be done in one moment. Airports are drivers of economic development for our regions, not just in direct jobs, but for the way we manage our assets to benefit communities. Unlike our airline partners, airport assets are not mobile. We are the only constants for our communities. As time has demonstrated, carriers will come and go, decide to merge, or have to dissolve. As cited in the CVG examples, it takes years of focused strategy to rebuild if a single carrier picks up and moves their operations. I want to thank you. I'm closing.